Welcome to the epicenter of sports and entertainment. This is The Rude Dog Show. Now, here's your host, Rudy Reyes.
Welcome to the Rude Dog Show. Good evening, everybody and your children. This is a family-friendly show. We get a little heated. It depends on who you are and depends on what part of the country you're in, where the heat keeps on bringing it. But you know what they say, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. We're going to bring the heat here. I have Rudy Campos from Sweep the League. Rudy, how are you? It's like Spider-Man meeting Spider-Man and saying, wait, who?
Yeah, it's kind of like the that meme where you're pointing at me and I'm pointing at you. And I'm glad to be here, man. It's it's been a long time coming, Rudy. You and I have talked before, and we've always said we got to collab sometime, and we got to collab and get together. And hey, sure enough, the moons align, the solar system is in perfect alignment as well. So we're here now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a while. I know that we were talking about doing this, and now here we are doing it. So thanks for joining, everyone. Get a little R&R in on your post 5 o'clock, depending on where you're at. And for most people, it is past 5 o'clock, especially here in the Pacific time zone. We're going to kind of jump into everything to do with the NBA, your leaders. Can the Celtics falter? Can they not? Can they stay hot and red hot, being the best team in the Eastern Conference? And overall, to be honest with you, in totality, within the NBA landscapes. We're going to talk about that. We're going to dive into and segue into the NFL free agency market. Very busy day in free agency. A lot of people you expected to be tagged were not tagged. And of course, that is kind of a low man's fruit, if you will, hanging from the tree, waiting for them to be picked off by another team who could utilize their services. Why? Because sometimes when you're top heavy, you have to cut off the weight at the bottom so you're not dragging on the ground. Of course, a lot of these teams that have cut free agents find themselves dragging their feet, wondering, well, what are we going to do? There are a few teams in the NFL that are under cap space, and some teams are in cap hell. So it just really depends on a variety of things. We'll go into all of that. But I wanted to start off talking about the Boston Celtics and where they're at, being that they're on fire, winners of 11 in a row. 11 in a row. I can't believe I'm actually saying it's 11 in a row. Okay, this is regular season, yes, Rudy, but when we look at how they got here and the way that they've been playing, what have you noticed about the Boston Celtics that just makes them so dangerous moving forward?
So in past seasons, we've seen some weaknesses with the Celtics. It's always been the Tatum and Brown show. We've seen lately Porzingis has turned it up. He's actually been a really good benefit for that team. The biggest two acquisitions, obviously, was Derek White, a while back for the Celtics. Former Spur, as you see the hat, he's definitely a former San Antonio Spur, but that added the defensive side that Boston needed. So they added one more piece this offseason. That was Drew Holiday. That was the final nail in this coffin for Boston. That made the Celtics a complete team, giving them two perimeter defenders to go along with Tatum and Brown. Holiday and White make the biggest difference. Now it's just about one word, Rudy, and that's health for the Celtics. They've been on a tremendous tear. I'm expecting them to go probably 65, 66 wins, be the best team in the NBA. I originally picked them to win the title this year, and so far so good. They're looking really good, but health is the question. Can Porzingis stay healthy? Can a lot of their bench core, Horford, Kornet is another one, Pritchard, these guys can stay healthy, continue rolling? This Celtics team is going to be a very tough out in the East.
They're extremely tough. Matter of fact, you mentioned Derek White. Derek White had a good season last year. His average was at like 3.6, 3.7. Well, he's jumped that up a big notch. And if you're a fan of cooking, you know who Emeril Lagasse is. He's kicked it up a notch in a big, big way, hitting 4.9% from the field. He's averaged 15.5 points per game. The guy is just playing much better ball. And I think the aforementioned pieces with Jaylen Brown just draining it from wherever he can on the court. You have Porzingis, who managed to stay healthy, and I think a lot has to do with the load management. I know it's not really a positive word throughout the NBA landscape, but it's really about load management for guys that you depend on so much during the regular season. that it's time to alter in once free agency and the dust settles. Now you get a guy who can really turn it up. And now you have such a deep bench that Boston does have. They can pull off whoever they want. If they wanted to pull out Derek White, you could put in Pritchard. He's fourth or fifth guy. They're moving parts and pieces to the Boston Celtics that really make them probably one of the toughest outs in the Eastern Conference. I take nothing away from the Milwaukee Bucks, but this team is playing total ball right now. The only way you're going to see them fail is if health starts to become an issue for one. Load management's not applied properly to the right guys at the right times. We've seen Jalen Brunson go down with the New York Knickerbockers. It was a non-contact injury. That does not help their cause whatsoever, fighting for a very positive spot within the Eastern Conference. But I mean, at number 4, if they don't trend and continue trending upwards with the type of vibrancy and play, we've seen them win without Brunson. I'm not going to take anything away from that, but they have to play this game throughout, not knowing the extent of Jalen Brunson's injury for the New York Knicks. But they're really looking up at the Cavaliers, who take on the Boston Celtics tomorrow. I think that's going to be a very interesting game. It's going to be a very telling game. And I think that teams are starting to figure out that, you know what, just because it's not the play-in tournament, just because we're not in the playoffs or in the finals, that we're not going to play that way. Is Boston playing playoff basketball before they ever get into a playoff picture?
Honestly, man, you bring up if they're playing playoff basketball. Honestly, I think right now the Celtics are playing finals basketball. They've already got their eyes on the prize, as you can tell by the regular season. I mean, it's just full blown Boston Celtics. We're taking, no mercy. We're just taking names and handling business basically for Boston. So they have their eyes on making that Eastern Conference Finals and getting to the finals themselves. The biggest takeaway that I get for Boston as well is you've got 3 guys, Tatum being one of them, but you also add Holiday and White. They're averaging almost 5 assists each. So that's 15 assists just as those 3 guys. So they're actually passing the ball really, really well. It's team basketball in Boston. Honestly, there's really nobody in the East because of injury. I mean, you're talking about Embiid. You're talking about Mitchell, who's kind of struggling to stay healthy right now. Brunson's injury is going to take, into effect. And now you see Middleton with the Milwaukee Bucks kind of having that ankle injury. Giannis gets injured from time to time. There's really nobody in the East right now that I can say confidently that's going to beat the Celtics. I think we're going to see more sweeps in 5-game series with the Celtics than any other series that we're going to see, even in the West Coast.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And speaking of the Western Conference, again, Celtics are the cream of the crop right now throughout the NBA, period. Mm-hmm. And even with the Wolves knocking on their door, literally the big bad wolf is knocking at the door of the Timberwolves up in Minnesota. There's a lot to like about Karl Anthony Towns. He's been playing fantastic, just lights out. He plays great defense. He knows how to get to the iron inside of the paint. He makes those layups count every single opportunity he has with that ball in his hands. And that's really what it boils down to. And what I really like about that it inspires other people to play and emulate the kind of play that he has been fortuitously kind of trying to push this team in that direction. He's your franchise star. He's your franchise guy. Yes, they have a lot of moving parts, but they're not as deep in regards to postseason play as you would expect from. But the Timberwolves find themselves at 43-19, Thunder 42-19, Nuggets are at 42-19, and the Nuggets are the defending champions. And Nikola Jokic is a guy who you find on a regular basis being able to move that ball and be kind of like the executor, right? Setting up the plays inside of the paint, outside of helping to get guys more involved. But Jamal Murray goes down with his shin splints, and now you're kind of wondering what his health status is. Where does he actually rank in regards to what does this look like for the Nuggets overall? Can the Nuggets get back on top of this?
When it comes to the Denver Nuggets, man, I originally, let's be clear. I picked the Celtics and Nuggets in the finals this year, and Denver's the one team I worry about in the West, but not so much because when you talk about experience, you talk about Minnesota, you talk about Oklahoma City, man. They're 2 very inexperienced teams. Denver's been there before. They're battle tested. They've got pretty much the same group coming from last year. So I understand with Murray's injuries from time to time, but I think he can overcome those injuries. And Denver won't be really affected with guys like Christian Brown, Reggie Jackson there. I mean, they still got players that can fill in for Jamal Murray. But when you talk about the Joker, You're talking about the modern day Arvydas Sabonis. He's what Arvydas Sabonis should have been in the NBA when he was in his prime. We're seeing it with Jokic. It's tremendous basketball. It's MVP basketball. I have him number 2 on our MVP rankings right now. But when it comes to Denver, I mean, top to bottom, they are the most complete team, in my opinion, in the West. They're the one team that I can give a bunch of credit to when it comes to playing the Celtics and maybe upsetting Boston in the finals. But my concern, Rudy, is this. There's going to be so many 7-game series in the West because the West is so deep this season. You can possibly see Denver having 2, possibly 3, 6, 7-game series where Boston may just cruise to the Eastern Conference Finals and also into the NBA Finals as well.
Well, no, and to your point, that certainly sounds fortuitous, and it sounds like it could be something that you want to have moving forward. You want to be able to play your back-to-back rubber match games. We'll see a couple rubber matches within the NBA within the next week or so. But I think more importantly, the Nuggets may be complete, but I think that the Thunder, as surprising as they are, and they looked good last year, they look even better, a better version of themselves, a better version of that team, a better version of how they're playing team basketball. You mentioned Arvydas Sabonis, and that kind of alludes me to Domantas Sabonis, his son. And as much as I like Arvydas, Domantas is no Arvydas Sabonis. It doesn't play like him, has no, I mean, some of the physicality he handed down to him genetically, but for the most part, he's not the guy that I think you can build a franchise around, even though he's doing decent in Sacramento. And obviously, you know, when you look at the Kings, are in the 7th position, and somehow the Suns find themselves kind of like in the rest category, would you say? I mean, do they find themselves looking up at other players with Booker now being out? They can't stay healthy. And then that allows other teams that are more tightly contested underneath them, like the Dallas Mavericks with Luka Doncic. You have the LA Lakers right there, who are always scrappy. You always find a way to get it done with LeBron James as that best option, right? The elder statesman on the floor, being more the aggressor when he needs to and helps facilitate that offense. Whereas you look at the number 10 spot with the Golden State Warriors. Yeah, Klay Thompson getting up there, not the same Klay Thompson version, but certainly a guy that you cannot remiss having as a part of your roster. Out of the Suns, Kings, Mavericks, Lakers, and Warriors, who makes that jump literally to get into that 5 spot? Because the Pelicans are barely playing a little bit over 500 basketball. Do they knock them out? Who ends up taking that number 5 spot, or maybe to avoid the play-in?
You know, out of those 4 teams, I wouldn't sleep on the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, you've got one of the best backcourts in the NBA with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. The addition of PJ Washington was massive for the Mavericks. Gives them good size, gives them a really good outside shooter for a big man. Derek Lively's been playing really good, and also you got to remember they have Daniel Gafford as well. So their size is going to be a big problem for some of these teams like the Lakers, the Warriors. If they got to play any of those teams in the play-in series, I think Dallas is that team to watch out of the 4. And we know what Luka has done. You know, Luka's an MVP candidate year in, year out for the Mavericks. And once you get Kyrie going, and he's on that, you've seen him on those scoring marches where he's just scoring bucket after bucket, and he makes it look so easy. Get those 2 guys going, especially with Josh Green as well in the starting lineup. Right. Dallas can be a very scary team in the West if they get into the playoffs.
Sure. No, they definitely can. I just don't know. Here's what I believe. I believe that when you look at the Mavericks, you do have somewhat of a deep bench, but you don't have a ton of great role players. You have Luka, who's a facilitator, but you don't have the kind of depth like, say, that the Clippers have, or maybe even the Nuggets have, having one of the deepest benches. And that's, I think, when you look at the parallels, I'm not trying to compare that and baseball, but the deeper the bench, the more go-to guys that you have, the fresh eyes, the fresh bodies, the fresh mentalities. You know, we see in the college landscape where your stars get fouled and you get 3 fouls in the first 5 minutes of the game. You're sitting out for the majority of it if you come back at all during that game. Sure. And you don't have the kind of depth. I'll give you a good example. Duke can't replace Filipowski. Okay, if he gets fouled 3 times in the first quarter, he's sitting out for probably the remainder of the game, if not 3/4 of that game, to come back and eventually just get fouled out. However, with that being said, I don't think the Mavericks have as deep of a bench as they probably could. I know they can call up guys from the G League and give them a one-day contract or a week contract or a day-to-day, whatever the case might be. I just don't know that the Mavericks have as much depth as they need to. Didn't do a ton of free agency, by the way, which is kind of surprising to me. And Kyrie Irving, as good as he has played, those two weren't complementing each other so well early on in this season, but they seem to kind of find a real a solid kind of, I don't know, a parallel amongst them, being able to complement one another as the season has progressed. So it's going to be really kind of hard to understand where this team actually lays in the grander scheme of things. The Kings find themselves in kind of a topsy-turvy, right? I mentioned Domantas Sabonis, Kieran Fox, they have more of a deeper bench. Now, Sacramento won a huge run last year, an unexpected run, to be perfectly honest with you. I didn't see them even getting to that point. Matter of fact, I had a tryout at 1140 Sacktown Sports in Sacramento talking about the Kings. And of course, it's Kings country up there. So everybody's all about the Kings and getting to where they want to be. The problem is that I just don't see the same fire and brimstone from the Kings this season as the play-in tournament is now kind of upon us here. And then the Phoenix Suns, I mean, again, getting injured at the wrong time for guys like Booker, and he's such a viable component, almost injured at the exact same time as he was last year. So when you look at the Mavericks, Kings, and Suns, who will have a better shot of maybe getting into the play-in?
So, it's the depth is a really big key. And if you go through along, all the teams, say Phoenix Suns right now, I mean, with no Devin Booker, that's going to hurt them a lot because Bradley Beal, to me, is just really inconsistent. I have no idea what I'm going to get out of Bradley Beal night in, night out. Kevin Durant's leadership, that's always out. That's always on the table. I mean, Phoenix just doesn't really have a true leader for that team. That's what kind of scares me going into the playoffs. Yes, they have scorers. You can have Devin and Kevin, but you're going to need them to go off literally like 4 or 5 games just to even keep them, ahead or even in contention. Laker wise, you never, they say, LeBron James, by some people he's the GOAT, in their opinion. You have Anthony Davis, but outside of that, are you getting consistent play from D'Angelo Russell? I mean, Austin Reeves is still hoeing and humming with the Lakers. Go to their bench. Their bench doesn't really do anything for me. And that's going to be the kind of the same tone throughout all of these guys, all these teams from 5 all the way down to 11 with the Utah Jazz. I mean, you're going to get good play from your stars where you're supposed to, but who has the most in-depth bench? I mean, you could probably go to Golden State. You're moving Clay to the bench. He's probably the 6th man coming off that bench. You have Chris Paul, but again, Chris Paul's injuries, they're there. You are seeing inconsistent play from Clay. Has he really accepted that role? There's so many questions from 5 through 11 that it's hard to answer. And when I look at it on paper, I almost trust Dallas a little bit more. With Sacramento, again, great run last year, but then we've seen them falter this year. So it's really tough to pick them, in my opinion, when it comes out of the West.
Sure. One thing that I can really say about the Lakers, and then we'll kind of segue out of the NBA, talk about the NFL. But this is more about the role players and the role that they're supposed to be playing, because right now they're not. They're not playing at the level that not only LeBron James needs them to play, not only does AD need them to play, but what they need to play for themselves, understanding their respective role. D'Angelo Russell, yes, early on in the season before the trade deadline, a lot of conversation in regards to him being shipped out and being sent somewhere else, and then acquiring an aforementioned Hawks player, which everybody should already know that by now. But someone who's going to help with the shooting component of where D'Angelo Russell was kind of faltering at that point. However, since then, he's turned that around in a very, very big way. The Lakers are not setting themselves up for success if the role players don't play the role they're designed to play in, and whatever formation, whatever lineup that is, whether it's a starting lineup or coming off of the bench. And I just don't see that the Lakers have that. Coming from a Lakers fan, I can say honestly, they just don't have the depth As much as LeBron James is going to do his best playing 40 plus minutes every single night to get to will them get into, some type of plan, I just don't see how long that's going to last, at least from that standpoint. This is Rudy Reyes, Rudy Campos from Sweep the League. We are joining you tonight. We're going to kind of segue out of the NBA, and because there's still so much ball to be played, there's really no way to pick your Eastern Conference final winner, your Western Conference final winner, who's going to go to the big game, who's going to get the Larry O'Brien trophy. There's still so much to unravel in the NBA. There's no way that we can even think about picking somebody else. So, and with that, the NFL draft is right around the corner. The NFL Combine just finished in Indianapolis, where they seem to have an homage paid to some of these teams that continually find a way to get the first overall pick. And of course, Chicago Bears find themselves in that category. Their strength of schedule is kind of up in the air right now. And I know that last year for the Panthers, because the Chicago Bears owned that first overall pick, we're 2-15. That's absolutely horrendous. Since then, the Panthers have made some moves, coaching and position coaches, and they have some draft picks, things of that nature. They're going to be better this upcoming season. I don't know how good they actually are going to be. On paper, everything looks good until it isn't. And that's where the real-time play comes into position as to whether or not these guys can get it done or not get it done. With that being said, some of the Bears, needs right now, clearly the quarterback position is seriously in flux. Always conversation around Caleb Williams. Is he going to go? Is he going to be the guy? Are they going to get rid of Justin Fields? Are they going to trade Justin Fields off? There were a lot of rumors him going to Pittsburgh because Mike Tomlin really liked Justin Fields coming out of the combine, coming out of the draft. But of course, once you're picked, well, you're picked. And the Bears coaching has not been the absolute best, to say the least. Even before Mike Ditka coached them in '85, they've just not decided on what to do with that position. So with that being said, what are your feelings about Justin Fields? Does he stay? Does he go? Do they grab Caleb Williams? What are they doing at the quarterback position for the Chicago Bears?
For the Bears, I scream from the top of my lungs, and I wish they would hear me. Is you build around Justin Fields, man. You've never given Justin, any opportunities, and now it's like I tell a lot of people, the Bears can do no right, they can do no wrong. And in their opinion, if they feel like they just want to move on from Justin Fields, hey, you've got the number 1 pick, you also got the 9th pick, so you can get some really talented players, one of them being a quarterback right there. But if you keep Fields, which I personally think you do, you've already got a piece in DJ Moore. If you want to trade down, you're going to get so many more draft assets. It's not even funny. Drop down, get yourself another receiver. At number 9, you'll probably be able to get a Fashanu or an alt from Notre Dame to help on the offensive line. You're going to get there's some great receivers in this class. So even if you were to go out and get 2 receivers later in the draft, you're probably going to see probably a Lad McConkey is going to be there, Xavier Legette out of South Carolina. There's just so many guys you can get later in this draft that are going to be beneficial if you build around Justin. I think if you keep Justin, you get those picks extra for trading out of number 1. You can maybe get a possible player. You're going to give Justin that opportunity to say, okay, we've put the pieces in front of you. Let's see what we got. Good thing, Rudy, is that they can go into, I think, pick 75 that they have. There's still going to be a player there that I really love for the Bears, and that's going to be Jordan Travis out of Florida State, quarterback. He got injured this year, but before the injury, very dominant quarterback at Florida State. Even if they go with a Michael Pratt, who should still be there out of Tulane, they can get that quarterback to say, okay, Justin, you weren't quite the guy right now. Let's go ahead and move on from you. We've got these other guys that are sitting a year under him.
Sure. Well, one thing that Justin Fields has not had is backup leadership. So there are free agents that are out there from a quarterback position that will allow for you to down pick, right? To get something in there. Quarterback coach has to be all over these guys, help train them up, put some solid competition within training camp, because there hasn't been any. And I think they just stopped paying guys like Jay Cutler last year. So, with the obscene, astronomically bad contract, and that's part of the front office, that's negotiations, that's, you just don't overload yourself as an organization with a horrible talent such as Jay Cutler. Yeah, he was good when he was good, but when he was bad, he was absolutely horrible. And you have
Yeah.
to have consistency from that position. But there are other positions as well they need to address. Wide receiver, they need a tight end. As you mentioned, McConkey, I think he'd be a fabulous pick, an absolutely fabulous pick for the Chicago Bears. Of course, they need an edge rusher and a cornerback. And I know they had just re-signed a gentleman who basically has earned every single ounce of money, and that's Jalen Johnson,
Yeah.
who clearly was franchise tagged at 19.8 million. I don't blame the Bears. I think that's a pretty decent contract, especially if that's spread out over a 3-year period. You pay the majority of that up front, and that's going to help your cap space. They don't have a ton of dead monies, so that certainly will prove as an opportunity for them to keep Justin Fields, as you stated. And I completely agree with you. Build around Justin Fields. Give him the tools. Give him the confidence, knowing that you're investing in his abilities and his capabilities. But as they say, the best ability is, well, availability. And I think Justin Fields has shown, despite a broken thumb, I believe it was, and some other anomaly injuries, they need to beef up that offensive line. If they do that and get a wide receiver and a tight end, especially in red zone, you're going to find out what he's really truly made of, and allow for Justin to just be, well, Justin. And I think you're going to get the most out of him moving forward. Speaking of moving forward, the next pick would be for the Washington Commanders. Now, Caleb Williams is from DC, so you're not really going to lose out on grabbing Caleb Williams. They need the quarterback. They need one very, very badly. They've been paying quarterback by committee. We've seen Cade McNown. We've seen a whole laundry list of guys. Ryan Fitzpatrick, amongst notable free agents, hasn't played in the league in a couple of years. But as far as the free agency track is concerned, they really need to go all in and invest the guy. They have Dan Quinn now as the head coach. They need to beef up in that position, beef up that offensive line, which didn't play actually too bad in totality last season. They need an edge rusher, wide receiver, inside interior offensive lineman, and a linebacker, because they did trade off Chase Young, and that kind of left that hole open. As time goes on, you start to see that. Do they grab Caleb Williams? I mean, we know quarterback position is the most valuable and sought after position on any given NFL field. Do they nab him where he stands right now?
Yeah, for me, I'll just let everybody know that Caleb Williams has never been high on my list, period. And I enjoyed watching him play, but the generational talent and everything that everybody says, media wise, it's driven. I don't see it in the game film. You clearly saw it in the combine as well. He kind of walked in with the diva attitude and kind of felt like he was going to go number one regardless. But if he's there for Washington at 2, I mean, he's from DC, so you're going to have to probably do, the hometown thing and take him at number 2. Honestly, the quarterback that they should be looking at, I really find a guy, and it's a big time reach, but I really find a guy like a Bo Nix would be really good for the Washington Commanders, somebody who has a pocket presence, somebody that has had success, especially at Oregon lately, somebody that can go in with the most important thing to me, because I get clowned a lot for saying Bo Nix is high on my list. The reason why he's high is because you don't get a whole lot of college kids that come out with that kind of experience. And he's got so many college games under his belt. It's guys like Tim Duncan in the NBA, David Robinson, those 4-year guys that come out that present themselves as leaders, that present themselves as locker room guys. And that's something that Washington needs moving forward. But again, if you're drafting based off of talent and, what your expectations are, Caleb Williams is there. This is where I kind of feel that maybe they turn it differently and go with a Jaden Daniels. I mean, you haven't seen a player like him and his caliber since they've had Robert Griffin from back in the day. So interesting there. If Caleb is there, they will take Caleb, but it wouldn't surprise me if they go Jaden if Caleb isn't there.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree with you. There's one thing that I will give a notation to Caleb Williams out of USC, is that he's got that big cannon arm. We've seen where the cannon arms get you. We've seen the Sam Darnold. I interviewed Sam Darnold multiple times. He was with the Jets. He's seen ghosts, of course, the Jets coaches at that time when he was there. we're probably also seeing ghosts. So it really doesn't surprise me that that you find a guy in Sam Darnold that were able to see ghosts and not be able to read defenses, because how can you see over a pass rush? You're going to end up seeing ghosts of cornerbacks and defensive linemen, and you're not able to really complete that ball. He wasn't a good fit in New York. I interviewed him when he was drafted by the New York Jets, and I thought to myself, this is a dumpster fire waiting to happen. And it wasn't on the shoulders of Sam Darnold. It was on the shoulders, again, of ownership and coaching. And since then, they have beefed up. They were ranked, I think, in the top 5 last year for defense. Offense certainly was very questionable. Now they have Aaron Rodgers, which certainly bodes very well, especially as we creep in the NFL draft and turn the regular NFL season, which happens to be on my birthday weekend. So happy birthday to me in advance.
Happy birthday.
Before we run out of thanks, before we run out of time, the New England Patriots, gosh, there's so much to unwrap there. They've had failed quarterbacks in their positions between Zapp, and I hate to say it, but the quarterback that they drafted was a bust. I hate to say that he's a bust. Yeah, he came out of Alabama, but that doesn't mean anything. Those skills did not translate into the NFL very well, especially with New England Patriots system. And to be honest with you, Bill Belichick, he screwed the pooch when it came to personnel decisions, draftees as a general manager, acting general manager, and head coach. Certainly, it's a head scratcher in regards to some of the guys that he did draft. I take nothing away from what he had done with guys like Tom Brady, who basically was not slated to be picked. But boy, did he make a big difference in that New England Patriots system. Out of the quarterbacks we mentioned, is there one quarterback that stands out to you? And to be honest with you, I think it's Luke May. I could be wrong on North Carolina. I think he's good. He has an arm talent. He knows how to read defenses. He understands the checkdowns. You know, he has very decent field vision. But I think that if they don't grab him, you could see a Jalen Daniels would make a very good addition as a guy under center for New England. What are your thoughts on that one? And could they actually ultimately draft down to grab some of that low-hanging fruit we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, so New England is a very fascinating position for me and a very fascinating team. You know, they obviously got a new coach, Jared Mayo there. The Mac Jones experience is definitely not working out for them, but they can do one of two things. Obviously, the first and the obvious one is taking one of the top quarterbacks. Now, Drake May out of Carolina is definitely probably high on a lot of people's lists as far as the top 3 go, between Caleb, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels. One guy that they keep talking about that could be in that top 3 range now was JJ McCarthy out of Michigan. I don't see JJ McCarthy being your franchise quarterback. In fact, I would drafting him anywhere in the first round would be a big mistake, and that GM is probably going to be sweating a lot this season if he has JJ McCarthy. But out of the guys, Drake May's the one guy I look at. Now, the thing with Drake is I don't think he understands his strengths sometimes. He does like to force a lot of passes into coverage, but nonetheless, out of the main guys in this draft that get talked about a lot, Drake is probably the most well-rounded, probably the better passer of all of them, a little bit more accurate than a lot of these guys. Jane Daniels is a pretty accurate passer, but again, I think Drake May has that under center leadership that you're looking for. He can scramble. He gives you a lot of good looks for New England. But on my board, I actually would prefer them not to draft a quarterback at 3. If they want to take a player, maybe go Marvin Harrison Jr. right there, maybe even a Malik Neighbors if you trade down a little bit, grab some draft capital. The reason why I say that, Rudy, is because you go draft a quarterback. These guys are not Patrick Mahomes. They're not Tom Brady. They're not Aaron Rodgers. They're not these guys. So you can't just bring in receivers to make these guys look good. I say you need to start with building those tools and getting those tools to get the quarterback of the future. It won't be Mac Jones. There's a lot of great quarterbacks. I mean, you could talk about Michael Penix Jr. probably dropping to the 2nd round where, you know, New England would be able to have the 34th pick. But go get a Marvin Harrison Jr. Go get a playmaker, even if it's a Brock Bowers. It doesn't matter. Go get a playmaker to where you can go get your quarterback of the future later, but you've already got that dynamic player for you on the offensive side. Me personally, if the Patriots are listening, which it's your show, I know they're listening. They always listen. All the teams listen to your show.